Thank you all for joining us for Stories from Abroad. This is going to be our final of 3 for this first round, but we hope to be continuing this in the future. My name is Delaney, and I'm the Events and Outreach Supervisor for the UW Study Abroad offices on campus. My guest here today is Madison Hartup. She grew up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and has been involved with international exchange programs since high school. Her undergrad major was East Asian Studies, and after graduation, she worked in Japan at an international exchange organization for 3 years. Now she is advancing her professional career in international education by pursuing her master's degree in global higher education at UW, and through part-time work at Wisconsin's 4-H International Exchange Program office. If the audience for this interview could keep your mics muted unless you would like to ask a question, that will be helpful to make sure the video doesn't glitch. Additionally, if you have any questions you would like to ask, you can either put them in the chat or just turn your mic on. We want this to be as conversational as possible as we navigate our technological world. Please know that we will be recording this session for promotional purposes, as well as I've included some links already in our chat, a little bit of intro about Madison and her program. This program is no longer running, so I included the studyabroad.wisc.edu/program search page, so you can find more information about Singapore and Malaysia, where this program ran, on our handy dandy map. It's also a great place to just kind of get lost in the potential programs where to look. So with that, I think that wraps up my intro, but I'd love to get started asking some questions. Good morning, Madison.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Where are you calling from today?
So I'm back home in Baraboo, Wisconsin, just hanging out at the parents' house during this crazy time.
Yes, understandable. I'll be heading to my parents' house this weekend as well. It's fun. Baraboo's great. Is it weather's good there as well? Or just Madison, if any of our audience is in Madison as well?
Yeah, no, I think it's supposed to be pretty good. This weekend is supposed to be really nice. So
very excited about that. Yes. So getting started on our study abroad questions, kind of the first one off the bat is, why were you interested in studying abroad? Or what was kind of the first thing that sparked your interest to look for programs through our office?
So I have been interested in exchange programs for a long time, as you said, since high school. And I had actually not really anticipated studying abroad at university per se. I had always anticipated doing something after graduating because of my prior connections to other organizations. But it turned out that there was this shorter term program that was offered in the winter in between classes. And so it seemed just more affordable, and it would fit in well with, a busy schedule. So it would offer me an opportunity to go abroad during my college career. So yeah, I think that's what motivated me. And the focus of the program and the countries were also definitely interesting to me as well.
Yeah. This adds in nicely to my next question. Would you be able to describe your program a little bit more? I know that you had highlighted that it was over winter break. And as we're looking at these, a lot of our signature programs are those that are shorter term. So if you go onto our website, there will be programs that often highlight UW or some variation of having UW in the name. For our audience, that's a signature program which is designed for UW students in mind. So I will let Madison do a little bit more description, but I wanted to include that caveat if we mention signature programs in the future.
Yeah, so my program, it was specifically built around a course that was led by a professor in the East Asian Studies department at UW. That was my major, actually, East Asian Studies. So this program, the course was based around the Chinese Diaspora in Southeast Asia, specifically in Malaysia and Singapore, which is where we went. So yeah, we were there for 2 or 3 weeks, and we basically, during that time, it was like a cohort of UW students, not all of them in East Asian Studies. There was kind of a mix of folks, and with our professor, and we traveled together from Singapore to Malaysia and a couple different cities in Malaysia and back to Singapore, and basically at these different cities, going to different sites and places that basically have a lot of meaning to the Chinese diaspora in that area. And yeah, and then after the program, we were expected to write a paper, regarding a topic within that specific topic. And so, yeah, that was the program.
And so you mentioned, so you traveled to a few different locations on the program. What was the housing situation like for that, kind of picking up and moving within a 3-week period?
Yeah, that was interesting. It's definitely, when I think of kind of traditional exchange programs, I think of folks who are, going and staying in one place, staying in a hotel or in a dormitory or an apartment, but we were in hotels for that time, or hostels. And so, yeah, kind of living out of a suitcase basically for those couple of weeks. So you had to be kind of choosy with what you brought to wear and things like that. But also really neat because you got to see a lot of different areas, obviously.
Right. Yeah. How was it being surrounded specifically by UW students and a faculty member? Did you enjoy that kind of system?
Yeah, it's interesting, because my history with exchange programs is primarily with homestay-based programs, staying with a family who's from the particular area. So it was a very different experience being with UW students and a professor. So I liked aspects of it. I did make at least one really good friend who I'm still really good friends with to this day. So I think that was really neat. Yeah, just like, making those connections. And, kind of going through that experience together, I think is interesting. You can sort of talk about what you see and what you experience and have some deeper conversations that way. I do miss like the aspect of connecting with folks, from those particular areas. That's something that's really just important to me in general. So I wish that I could have had a little bit more of that, perhaps. But I can see the pluses and minuses to both situations, right?
Yeah. And then I'll stop asking about your program specifics here. I just have one more question that I kind of thought of. What was it like having such a short program duration? Yours is actually the shortest program that we're highlighting in our interview series. And I was wondering, as you've mentioned about exchange programs and things like that, those are often longer. How did you feel having that kind of short period of time and how that impacted your studies and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. At the time, it felt longer, perhaps, but now I have a little bit more experience just like living abroad for long chunks of time. So it does seem incredibly short now. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a whirlwind, right? And especially because that program, you were going place to place, so you didn't really have necessarily time to like settle down, to sort of get roots perhaps in a certain area. But in the same way, I think that was also just really neat that there could be so much packed into such a short experience. Yeah, and really just and nice that it was between semesters, right? So it was a good way to break and I could go to classes and stuff, no problem in the spring, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to include a link here for our audience as well as our broader viewers who will be seeing. Oh, we already have a question as well. I'll include getting started as a way to questions to ask as well for yourself on what program structures and things like that will be helpful. We have a question already. So was it hard to deal with adjusting to the heat, humidity, and its effects in such a short span, especially coming from Wisconsin winters? I feel that. That's a good question to ask as well. Yeah. What was that kind of contrast in weather?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I will say my prior international experience is in Japan, and the first time I went to Japan was in high school, and that was in July, which folks who've been to Japan know that is like the worst time to be in Japan because it is incredibly hot and humid, and air conditioning is just less strong than we have it in the US, for sure. So it definitely wasn't my first time dealing with that kind of heat and humidity, but Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge, but I think I packed, I kind of knew what clothes I wanted to pack that would be comfortable for me to wear. And also I felt like Singapore, at least, and probably Malaysia as well, we had access to air conditioning, so even if it was hot outside, you could get inside and you were comfortable. I should also say that when we went to Malaysia, we were, when we were going place to place in the country, we were on a tour bus, actually. So, that's air conditioned. So, no, I think it was okay as long as you pack the right clothing, and drink lots of water. Yeah.
I empathize with that as well. My study abroad experience, I was in Italy in June and July, and it was, that same kind of vibe of, are we going to have air conditioning today? Hopefully. Trying to find ice cubes was very challenging type of a thing. Speaking of challenges, what was the most challenging part for you to adjust during this program? And how did you deal with this? We know we've talked about weather a little bit, but is there anything else that was significantly challenging for you?
I think something that was a little bit challenging for me was, at the time, I could get a little bit wigged out about like health stuff. Not as much anymore at all, but at the time that was just how I was. So, going to a Southeast Asian country where, there's more concerns about certain illnesses and diseases and stuff with mosquitoes and whatnot, having to take being prescribed like malaria medication that you're supposed to take the whole time. Which also malaria medication can kind of make you feel a little bit off as well. So I think just like dealing with that discomfort and sort of figuring out how am I going to deal with this so I can stay comfortable and yeah. And I did get a cold like halfway through. And so, that was just, I think being sick anywhere that's not home can always be a little bit, disconcerting. And so figuring that out, but that was the nice thing about having a group of students with me, is that you have folks who understand how you're feeling and you can kind of talk through it together and get through it together. So ultimately it worked out just fine.
Good. I'm going to include another link. That's going to be a commonality throughout the interview, just because I like to provide the resources if people have questions about health and safety on our programs. As a part of our pre-departure orientations and things like that, most likely specific to the programs, they'll talk a little bit more about health concerns and vaccines and things like that are required, as that is a common thing for a lot of our programs. So that link will be especially helpful. And if you're looking at a specific region or something like that, reaching out to the advisors to talk more about that is helpful too. But yeah, cold medicine is an interesting thing to find abroad because it looks different. I mean, you can't just go and find Dayquil. That's not the same sort of thing. So
yeah.
Oh, we have another question from Adam. What was the mix of scheduled group time versus free time on your program?
So I have to think back a little bit because it was several years ago. But yeah, so we did definitely have like scheduled group time during the day and for meals as well. We're eating our meals mostly in restaurants, right? Or in like hawker center, like food courts, basically. So yeah, I mean, you're with the group pretty much all the time, right? So you're staying in hotels together and whatnot as well. But we did definitely have like some free time in the evenings, get to go out and explore a little bit as a group, or just, with a couple of other classmates. So I definitely enjoyed that. And we were there during New Year's, I should say. I almost forgot. Yeah, so that was great. We were in Singapore for that, and it's a beautiful city, and there's lots going on. So really fun to get to experience that.
Did you do anything special for that holiday, or were there challenges like being there for a major holiday?
I don't really, to be honest, I don't, New Year's is not really significant for me and my family. So like, I don't really care, but no, it was fun. It was the first time being in like a really big metropolis, right, for New Year's. And it wasn't Chinese New Year's, so there wasn't like wasn't necessarily like the same level of perhaps like cultural experience as there would be, but it felt, more perhaps like New Year's would be celebrated here. But a big city, so you get to go out and go to fancy restaurants or, fancy bar or whatever. And that was just really fun. And they had fireworks as well. So really beautiful.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's such an interesting like add-on for such a short program as well. I don't know if there are other programs that do exist over like major international holidays as well. How did your experience of abroad contrast with your expectations before going on the program? Especially with your knowledge and kind of experience already being internationally focused. What were kind of those expectations building towards?
That's a good question. I just think it's just a really different experience from my previous international experience at the time, because before that I had been to Japan and done the homestay program. And I was a high schooler at that time. So, it's just different being an adult versus being a minor, where you're staying with a family who's taking care of you. So yeah, this was an experience just to get out and to sort of, in some ways, be a little bit more independent perhaps, but also, have like that cohesive group experience as well. So, I never felt alone or like I was not supported. Yeah, I feel like it did live up, I guess, to my expectations of the program. I wished afterwards, I definitely wished, I was like, oh, I kind of wished we had stayed in one place for longer, perhaps, because then it would have been nice to get to know, some of those cities a little bit more. Like you got a really good taste of each one, and they were really interesting, and I would have loved to explore those. But also, very cool to have seen all of these different areas, and just get to have that unique experience as well. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. How many cities did you end up going to during this program?
I have to kind of list them off. So we started in Singapore, and then we went to Malacca, and then Kuala Lumpur, Penang, and Kuching. And then we also had gone to a place in the rainforest kind of in between there. So like 5 or 6 places.
Oh, yeah. I had no idea it was that many as well.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. That's so vastly different from my experiences abroad. So it's really cool. And I'm glad that I at least am getting to know more about programs that are so different as well. I don't want to call out our audience members, but I do like to kind of highlight the credits in the academic portion. And we do want to speak a little bit more about academics and credits. How many credits did you receive for this program? Do you remember?
I'd have to go back and look at my transcript.
That's fair.
Yeah, like I want to say it's, no more, it was probably no more than 5, right? I'm pretty sure.
For the shorter programs, it can be usually like 1 course or something like that.
Yeah, it was equivalent to a course, basically.
Okay. And then if our audience want to talk, I know we had spoken about your undergraduate major as being East Asian Studies. If our audience wants to throw in, I'm going to throw out a question for participation about what majors we have represented today, and then we'll kind of move into our academics portion as well. So if you want to throw it in the chat, you're more than welcome to. I myself was a theater and Italian double major, so very different majors represented, at least in Madison and I. And I'm going to include a really helpful resource. We do have poli-sci, community and nonprofit leadership. My brother was a CNPL major at Madison. That's fantastic. Cool. So we have a variety of majors represented here, which is great. I'm going to include the major advising pages, as I have mentioned, this helpful resource. It's a resource that is created by the departments on campus for these specific majors, and it's growing significantly. And so you'll be able to look and see what programs they recommend, durations they recommend, and even time when to go abroad. So I think that that's a great kind of way to get started as a roadmap of recommendations in that sense. And it also talks about the credits that you can earn. as you had mentioned that this program was part of your major, were you able to, I know this is kind of getting into the weeds and it was a little bit ago, but were you able to apply those credits in any way for your major?
Yeah, I mean, I think it fulfilled, it went towards the credits of the East Asian Study major. I know that we had folks in that program who are not East Asian Study majors. I would say a majority were not, actually. Yeah, I mean, I got credit for it, and it did go towards my major. And if I think about, kind of how my credits ended up working out, by the last semester of undergrad, I only had to take like 1 or 2 classes. I
oh wow, yeah.
a good amount. So I'm pretty sure that went towards it.
Yes, more questions from Adam, thank you. This is also going along with my question that I was about to ask. So they ask that you mentioned that you completed an essay after the program. What was the preparation like before? Did you meet your fellow travelers before the program actually started?
Yeah, so to answer that first question, yes, so I did complete an essay after the program, and preparation for that, what did that look like? I think I had started to, think about, because obviously, that was something that they had shared that we would be doing for this course at the onset, right? So I think I had already started to think about, what sort of topic, and then as we, were in the countries and going to museums and going to temples and other, cultural sites, definitely thinking further about, what is interesting to me here from what I'm learning, and then selecting that topic and doing the research paper on that. And as to the second question, yes, I did meet the other UW students. We had like an orientation beforehand with the study abroad office and with this professor. And so, yeah, we had made connections before heading off.
Cool. Can you speak a little bit more about what that day-to-day kind of class schedule would look like? I know that you had mentioned that you were going to all of these different like group excursion activities and things like that. Were the course itself, was that the class of like visiting these places? Or if you could just speak to that, like the academic course structure a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good question, because we weren't like going to classrooms, right? Like it wasn't, a traditional format at all. We were really going, each day kind of had a focus, okay, we're going to go to a Chinese temple in the morning, and then we're going to, go to a museum about the, some of the different ethnic groups in the area in the afternoon. And then we would have like debriefings, with the professor. I mean, that's the thing about being on a tour bus, right? Like sometimes when you're going in between places, you can have those particular like conversations and discussions.
So it's like one big long discussion.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't necessarily formal, no PowerPoints or anything like that for sure. But yeah, I mean, that was interesting just to be experiencing these different sites and having the opportunity to talk about it further.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that structure, or was it ever like overwhelming, kind of balancing the academic side while also traveling with all of these places that you're going?
I don't think it was particularly challenging per se. It was interesting, some of the sites that were chosen, because obviously they were working with a tour company in that country, right? So I mean, I think that a lot of the sites they chose were thought out really well and really interesting. Occasionally there were some sites where it was just a little bit touristy perhaps, and just sort of, it's like, why are we here? Sometimes questioning that a little bit, but I think that's interesting too, because then you could sort of talk further about like how is that dynamic work with tourism and different aspects of culture. And, I that was also pretty interesting.
Yeah. With this, so I don't want to assume that your course was in English. Was your course taught in English, though you were in a location that doesn't often have like readily available English?
Yeah, no, it's all in English. I mean, that's the thing, Singapore and Malaysia as well, folks really do speak English a
Okay.
lot. You have multiple ethnic groups who may have their own languages. Obviously, Singapore, a lot of folks speak Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, but there's a lot of other languages there as well. So, yeah, the course was all in English, and I'm someone who studies Japanese, so I wished perhaps that I had known a little bit more, Mandarin or other languages before going. But our professor spoke Mandarin, so.
Okay. Was the language difference ever a barrier for you?
I don't think so. In the bigger cities, really, folks speak English. In a lot of public sectors, I think. But perhaps in some of the smaller areas. But the whole thing is we're with our professor, or we're with a guide, who speaks Malay and other languages as well. So, I don't remember it being an issue.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm kind of rambling here.
No, that's totally fine. It's fun to relive these experiences and reflections as well. It's a conversation. It's candid. Don't worry about it. So kind of getting into our returning to campus and following your program. I know you had mentioned that you've had a few multiple international experiences since then. But how do you think the program impacted your time at UW-Madison during undergrad, whether that's personally, professionally, academically? What kind of was the main takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I think as someone, obviously my major was East Asian Studies, but my focus was on Japan, Japanese language, and history and culture. And so I think getting a bit of a broader picture on other cultures that are part of that subject, I guess, that I think was very interesting. And since I've graduated, I've my interest, right, in other cultures and multilingualism in particular, and just exchange programs in general, has only continued to increase. And so I think that having this other experience, right, just more, a broader international experience has been helpful in that regard, and kind of opening my interest to different areas of the world. And yeah, I mean, I'll just say that it was nice to have a study abroad experience. I didn't think that was going to be something in the cards for me. So I'm grateful that I was able to do that, and have good experiences, and have some friends from that still. That's a wonderful takeaway for sure.
Yeah, that's so wholesome. Is there one piece of advice that you'd wish you'd known before going on this program specifically?
That is a good question. I would just encourage, folks with those short-term programs to take advantage of the time that you're there. And I think back to my experience, and I experienced a lot, but just continuing to take advantage of your time there, because it is so short. And I know it's really tiring, for sure. But it's only 2 or 3 weeks, right? So it's nice if you can really pack it in there, and have those really rich experiences and memories that you can take with you.
Yeah. I know you've spoken about kind of that travel fatigue. Was there any way that you were able to kind of combat that fatigue while you were on the program, as it was probably a full packed schedule, I'm assuming, almost every single day?
Yeah, it really was. And there was a little bit of, there was some physical activity in a couple of spots too, some hiking and things that were pretty challenging at the time. Cool experiences, but definitely sore muscles the next day. Yeah, no, there were ways, we could take rests in a hotel. And the nice thing about the tour bus, right, is there were some times where we were driving from place to place, and you could just really conk out for a while and relax there. Also, there were just really, there's some great massage therapists in Malaysia. At least that's where I went to go get massages, and that was wonderful. So
good. That's That's an interesting element to have in there. Are there any other recommendations that you have for both Singapore and Malaysia that you would like to speak to? Whether that be food, locations, kind of the visits that you made through your program or anything like that.
Food. I mean, food is Malaysia and Singapore both have just amazing food. You know, there's the hawker centers, which are like food courts.
Okay.
And so I know like I think our professor and our tour guide like showed us some of those, and we went, and I would just continue to eat there in a heartbeat, you know, rather than necessarily like a fancy restaurant, because there's so many options. You can get anything. There's fresh fruit juice, you know, that's amazing. And then also I just think I always love going to different religious sites in different countries. And so I was able to obviously go to some Chinese temples, but then also there were some Hindu temples. Didn't get to go to a mosque, but I would just, you know, I think going to those spaces, if you're able to, and you're not being intrusive, just can be really, really interesting to kind of compare and reflect how that's perhaps different from your own culture.
Yeah. Is there anything, I mean, you've spoken about those opportunities, but is there one thing that you can think of that was the most impactful about being surrounded? It sounds like by a myriad of kind of how cultures have been interwoven. Is there anything that you've, like the biggest kind of impactful piece that you can remember?
Yeah, I mean, I just think seeing that really vibrant multiculturalism was interesting. As someone, you know, I'm from Baraboo, Wisconsin. You know, we have diversity for sure, but it's not always so apparent, right? And it's predominantly white, and so I think seeing that a culture where that's a little bit more apparent, you know, and can be harmonious in a lot of ways, and there's also discontent for sure, but I just think that was just very fascinating and grew my appreciation, right, for you know, for multiculturalism and multilingualism too. You know, just being able to, even if you don't necessarily speak fluently in your neighbor's language, you can know a couple words, right? So you can be friendly and welcoming to each other.
Yeah, that's a very culminating, reflective answer. I really like that answer. I want to respect our audience as well. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to throw them in. I also have to, whether or not, comply with our Zoom is going to kick us off eventually. We have about 5 minutes left, but I have one more question that I love to ask at the end. So if there are any other questions from the audience, please feel free. But otherwise, if you studied abroad again, what would you have done differently?
I think, what would I have done differently? I think I would have perhaps done a little bit more exploring. You know, not to say that we didn't do exploring, we definitely did. Yeah, I think I would have explored a little bit more. I would have perhaps tried to learn a little bit more of some of the languages, you know, and not be afraid to give them a go. I think that's often challenging, is even if you know a little bit of a language, you know, using those words just can sometimes feel a little bit awkward, but people appreciate it when you try. So yeah, I would have done more of that. And if I had the opportunity, perhaps, you know, I would have tried to do more of some homestays or some of those kind of programs as well. You know, I feel like perhaps that's the one thing that I did really miss from this program, was making those connections, you know, with local communities, but also hard to do on a short-term program as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Do you have any other recommendations on maximizing a short-term program specifically?
Yeah, I mean, just, I think, as I've said, like, you know, really engaging with everything that you can, and, you know, taking the rest you need to, but also just realizing it's 2 weeks, you know, you can sleep on the plane ride back home. You know, it sounds harsh, but that's how I feel. And yeah, and just enjoying the local experience and the food and the atmospheres, and making those little connections with folks when you can.
Yeah, that's a great, always great reflective answers from Madison.
I
Is there,
try.
I see it. I recognize the reflection. Is there anything else you want to share specifically about your experience for our audience or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I just say that, there's so many, Southeast Asia is just such an interesting place, and there's so many different cultures, and I'm sure tons of differences between, countries and regions. So I would just encourage folks to go there and check it out if you have the opportunity. Yeah, I would, and I would just encourage folks to think about, if there's, if you're worried that, you can't fit in an exchange program because, you have classes you need to take certain semesters. If you have the ability and capacity, I would encourage you to entertain the idea of a smaller program. I think they're a really neat way to have some pretty impactful experiences, even in just that shorter amount of time.
Great. Yes, I think that's kind of really a great way to wrap it up as well. For our audience members, if you have any additional questions or want to learn more about items that we discussed today, there are a load of resources on our website, but you can also contact our office directly. I'll highlight their email address, as well as our website, which I mentioned is studyabroad.wisc.edu. There you'll be able to find basically anything under the sun about our programs that we can offer. If you have additional questions for Madison specifically, I can pass them along through my email as well. I don't want to speak for Madison, but like as we've been talking about it, we can talk about our abroad programs and our experiences from international, kind of that educational experience for hours. So if questions do come up, please feel free. As well
Absolutely.
as this interview will be on our social media. And so you'll be able to come back and visit these questions as well, and find a lot of other resources about embracing culture from your couch, as we are all virtual currently, as well as more program announcements and things like that on our socials, which are Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I see that we are counting down for our Zoom interview today. I want to thank our audience for coming, as well as Madison. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about these programs and just in general. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Delaney, and thank you, audience members.
All right, I think we're going to end our meeting here. Stay safe, stay well, everyone, and have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much.